podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the Better Know a Community Indicator Project series of coffee break webinars. My name is Chantal Stevens with the Community Indicators Consortium. In a short 20-minute presentation, we hope to give you enough information to consider this indicator project a resource and an inspiration. We have more webinars coming up in the winter/spring series. Go to communityindicators.net/webinars. You can also find recordings of past webinars at that address. And so it's my pleasure today to introduce our presenter, Emily Wen with Landscape Omaha. Note that there is no time for questions during this short broadcast, but a survey will appear at the end and you can enter questions there or contact the presenter directly. And now, Emily.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are calling in from across the country. My name is Emily Wynn, and I am the Director of Research and Evaluation with the Omaha Community Foundation. Excited to share a little bit about the Landscape, our community indicator project here in Omaha. So the Landscape really is, we call it a community-driven research project that incorporates publicly available data, which is our indicators, looking at policy and insight gathered from direct engagement with residents in specific targeted areas. And so I want to provide a little bit of history about the origins of the Landscape. The Landscape is sponsored by the Omaha Community Foundation, a community foundation with a geographic focus of the Metro Omaha, which primarily covers two major counties on the eastern portion of Nebraska, Douglas and Sarpy County, and then also the western portion of Iowa, specifically for this project in Pottawatomie County, which also covers the city of Council Bluffs. And we're a community foundation of about 1,300 donors who actually make gifts through their account out into the community. About 95% of our grants that go out every year are directed by our donors, and about 5% are directed through some of our grant programs. That will be important, an important context for later as I talk more about how we've actually used this project. But the inception of the Indicator Project really came from learning from other community foundations across the country, with the development of a steering committee that really started in 2014. And that really consisted of folks who had engaged in other data projects, key community leaders, including city, and then other philanthropy. We have a number of private foundations who are very supportive and involved in the community, and so they really were important to include as part of our steering committee. They also provided some of the funding to actually help us build the website itself. And then my position was actually created in 2015 with the primary or the beginning focus of actually developing this project and looking at the data itself. And so I started the beginning of 2015 only about after one steering committee meeting had actually happened. And the steering committee we met with on a regular basis until the website was launched in 2016. And we started when we launched the Landscape website, we really just started with 2 focus areas. And then in 2018, by then we had gradually added all of the other areas to reach the 8 focus areas that we look at as part of this project. So you can actually see those 8 areas. We started with health and neighborhoods and then built from there with the 2 most recent focus areas of civic engagement and arts and culture. And I anticipate that there could be additional focus areas. I know as I look at other national projects that are out there, the environment is also one that we hear about that we may think about adding later. But for right now, these 8 focus areas are really where we're starting. And when we actually developed this project, we spent quite a bit of time around how do we actually select indicators. As you all know, being involved in this work, there's often massive amounts of data and indicators that you could actually choose from. And so we really started with looking at current community prioritization. We didn't want this project to be counter to other projects that were happening. We really wanted them to align. So for example, in health, our community does a community health needs assessment once every 3 years. And from that data, the health department and all of our major hospitals develop a community health improvement plan where they have anywhere from 5 to 7 priority areas. So when we actually developed the health area, we ensured that the indicators we chose aligned with that community health improvement plan, and then we talk about that alignment on the website because we feel like it's important to really elevate work that is already happening rather than feel like we're duplicating or we're counter to other work happening. We also felt like this website was an opportunity to highlight where we see some of our biggest needs. I know in other projects, folks try to take a wide look at what's happening, and we decided to stay really focused, which is why if you actually explore the website, you only see about 3 to 7 actual indicators within each area because we wanted to have a little bit of focus. And we got that focus from really meeting with key experts in these areas. We spent a lot of time connecting with experts in each of these areas to really understand what they were seeing was happening, how that mirrored the data that we were looking at, and ultimately then helped us really decide where we want to start with. We do see opportunity to add additional indicators to some of these areas over time, but for us, what you see on the website was just where we really wanted to start. We also then, as we developed the indicators in these areas, really used our steering committee for that review and feedback process. So if you actually go and visit the website, all of the data that we use to develop these indicators are publicly available and regularly collected data sources. Some of them, like education, requires a little bit more time on the Department of Education's part to get us the data, but it's all publicly available, which we felt really strongly about being important to include. So we have a very consistent structure. If you visit the website, we start on every indicator page with a headline to say, what is the key finding for this particular indicator? If someone only took away one thing, what would we want them to take away? Then we have a section called Let's Break It Down, where we are really trying to dig further and disaggregate the data, whether that's by race, geography, socioeconomic status. We're trying to show that there usually is a deeper picture in the data. Then we want to build a narrative to really talk about why is it important? Why are we talking about it? Why does it matter? And then finally, in our community, we often like to compare ourselves to other places or even nationally. So in the how do we compare, that's really our opportunity to do that. And then at the very bottom, we always provide citations and try to link to the actual sources. So that if folks want to dig in deeper in a particular area, they're able to do that. We ultimately really believe with the data that it's important to engage and share the information, but we also believe as part of this project that conversation and connection within the community is very important. And so as we developed the actual indicators that you see on the website, we also wanted to do community engagement and listening, because we often find in our community that data only tells half the story, that you really have to sit down and talk to folks about what this means for their lives. And so we really see that the data is the foundation and the context is really coming from listening and talking to people. And we believe that those two things combined is what ultimately creates community change. So 2 years ago, in partnership with nonprofits, we actually engaged with over 1,600 residents to really understand their lived experiences and what was important for them. And then looked at how we tie that back to what we're seeing in the data as far as findings and results. And what we learned through the listening is that social support networks is really, really, really important. And it's hard, you don't see great data points all the time for that particular piece, but that was a huge theme that really came from that listening. Also heard a lot about vibrant neighborhoods, which we were seeing in the data around needs around home ownership and diversity in home ownership and quality of housing and affordability of housing. But it was interesting to think about it from these different perspectives in talking with folks on the ground. And then arts, culture, and recreation and access definitely came up as a major theme. And then, of course, public transportation, financial stability, and then segregation were the three other major themes. And public transportation really connected with what we were seeing in the data. And then thinking about our workforce data really connected to this financial stability need. And so if you visit the website today, you only see a link to the full report on the main page, but we're actually going to be revamping that website over the next year so that we're better reflecting both the listening and the quantitative data. And the couple of data points I just wanted to highlight that have been really impactful. First is taking a look at this basic needs around housing. We looked at fair market rent rates for this city and compared that to what would that mean if you wanted someone to only spend 30% of their income on housing. And so what we learned very quickly was that there was a definite gap between what our minimum wage is at $9 an hour and what you actually needed to afford renting in this community. We have a narrative in this community that Omaha is a very affordable place to live, and we really see this landscape project as an opportunity to provide information that helps counter some of those narratives to say that this community is not affordable for everyone. We actually had a board member of ours who owns their own company take a look at this and say, wow, I didn't realize that this was an issue, and I want to go back and look at how much I'm paying my people. And so we're hoping that this sparks different conversations and different thought processes, not just with our family of 1,500 donors, but also with a wider community as well, too. We also see a huge equity issue in this community, and what was really surprising for folks is when we compared ourselves around home ownership, specifically for individuals who are Black, and that we are lower than the national rates of home ownership. And again, it's wanting to start that conversation around equity in lots of different areas, but this just was one way that we found that folks really were interested in and then wanted to dig in a little bit more. So when we look at sort of our key accomplishments, we really spent the first couple of years just trying to develop the website, really look at how are we including engagement. And I would say that the engagement piece we did in 2017, we did again in 2019. And so we're finalizing that report, and we'll be sharing that report of what we learned on the website. And for us, it wasn't about just providing that education. It was also helping the foundation for the first time think about how do we prioritize areas that we might actually want to have a little bit more focus. Historically, the foundation has operated without key priority areas and without publicly talking about those priority areas. So the landscape was really an opportunity to create a system of knowledge to help us really think about where we might focus time and energy. And we've only been doing that in creating a little bit more of that focus, I would say, in the last year. And we're still working on that. And so as part of this process, when we looked at both the data and then the listening, we've identified 9 key priority areas. And at this point, we are beginning to think about, okay, so what does that mean and what might we do? As a community foundation, like I said earlier, only about 5% of our grants that go out are directed through our grant programs. We don't have a large discretionary pool. We really have to think about how we share this knowledge with our donors and help inform them and provide new opportunities for them to get involved in making some changes in some of these big areas. And so that's a really key part of this work. And a part of this work that you don't see on the website is we are also creating regular knowledge reports that go a little bit beyond the data and provide more insight about where we see great work happening to identify some of the issues that we're talking about in the landscape. And we'll continue to do that as we move forward in this project, because that's really, really important for us because of how we're structured and the way in which the funding is flowing through the foundation. We did also, though, see an opportunity based off of the landscape data and what we were learning to think about some of our current programming. And so one of our largest grant programs called the Fund for Omaha, we in this last year have aligned the funding and the grant process to ask organizations when they're applying to connect to the landscape and connect to some of those major issues that we see based off of the data through the indicator project. We also have taken this sort of strategy and this way of thinking about data and insight to work with our donor services staff. We have a giving circle with young professionals that have just recently aligned their priority areas to the priority areas that we have within the landscape. And we see more opportunity to continue to do that as time goes on. We also are developing an impact investing program. It's still in the development phases, but when we talk about social impact and what we want to accomplish in social impact, we are really tying that back to the priority areas that we are finding in the landscape data. So for us, the landscape in this community indicator project is a really foundation of knowing and understanding the community that we're then looking at how we're integrating that and thinking about priority areas for our funding. And we're very much early in those stages. Like I said, we only in the last year just aligned our current largest grant program to the landscape that we're still learning. And then again, in this upcoming year, we will actually be redeveloping the website to offer different ways for people to really connect with the knowledge and the information. We're also finding that a number of nonprofits are using the information as they write grant requests, both to us and then to other private foundations here in this community. So we do also see it as a resource for nonprofits as they're trying to make their case. We also saw a nonprofit in the community use the housing graphic that I showed as part of some of their appeal because they were in the affordable housing business. And so we want to make those graphics more accessible for nonprofits to be able to use to just elevate the story that they're already telling. So I want to thank you so much for your time today and your willingness to engage. You'll receive a short survey here in just a few moments. We'd love for you to take that. And then also, if you have any questions, that would be the spot to ask them. And then I will get those and then can certainly respond back. But as always, feel free to reach out. My contact information is there for you. We found in this process as we were developing the landscape that we really benefited from engaging in other community indicator projects and are very grateful from the many folks who engage and answer our questions. And so I'm happy to do that if anyone wants to reach out as well too. So thank you.